Hi, this is Barbardian Yu-Gi-Oh! League coming with you with a reaction video actually. There is a lot of discourse in the TCG Yu-Gi-Oh! Probably TCG Masterduel, whatever Yu-Gi-Oh! We want to put it into, about the concept of a healthy Yu-Gi-Oh! Mid-range versus combo, I guess. It's weird because they didn't even factor in stun, but I digress. And right now there was between two individuals, Anthony Yu, I think he is pioneered the video which the people is discussing about, and I think Joshua Smith, who's coming from the mid-range side. You is from the combo side, Joshua is from the mid-range side because Joshua is, if people don't know, is one of the most decorated individuals in Yu-Gi-Oh history right now. I think he's a 5-time YCS winner, and he's a world champion. Obviously, he have other accolades, but them is the ones that people probably know him best for. Uh, I think the conversation, although as long as it is, we'll try to look into it and interject our 2 cents about where, if both of them have a point, neither of them have a point, how they should really be proceeding these things. Because the thing is that you gotta understand that they're coming from two different sides of biases. He prefer playing combo, Josh prefer playing mid range. I myself have dabbled in every single one of them. If I say what I prefer, I will always say I prefer mid range. But let's not kid ourselves. Our right now on Masterduel, our main decks we play is our combos. So, but for now we'll just listen to the video and see what going on. I think we are picking up from
and
here.
what you're trying to get to, and that's why we're here today to give you the chance to kind of like reiterate over this entire thing. And of course, you've been a very successful combo player as well recently, even though you say, of course, you also like the mid-range decks and stuff like that. But yeah. So I think, to me, the most important part is that we kind of like separate this entire thing into two main discussion points. Because when I watched your video, I feel like there was really two main arguments being brought up. The one is the whole like mid-range, are mid-range decks healthier than combo decks? You know, should people feel like mid-range is the right way to go about it and something like that? Which is something I want to discuss secondly, actually, because I think the most important thing, the thing that also, from my perspective, got you so emotional, was the fact that we need to talk about how people interact with each other in this community when, for whatever reason, they think that their deck is healthier or cooler or whatever than someone else, right?
Alright, we probably are going to skip this part. I don't know where it will continue, but I will probably put my interject. I am from a local side of, we play Yu-Gi-Oh in Barbados, and in Barbados our Yu-Gi-Oh scene is not that big, but it is competitive, somewhat I should say. We are not playing meta to the extent that we will be probably playing like Rollad or I think probably that's the only that we don't have on here right now. And I quite certain sooner or later either someone's gonna put it up, if not myself. But our scene is not competitive, but it's not having competitive level decks, but it's very hyper competitive. So the interactions that we have is more of like teasing or sometimes hype or what we would call socially bad behavior. The thing is that once you are understanding that we are playing a game for the essence of fun, then those certain behaviors might be able to be overlooked. Like for example, there's someone oddly enough stated this in our last tournament that the players of Barbados tries to make you like into wrestling. They're trying to mold and create stories so that we can have more exciting outcomes or more excited interactions when certain duels happen. Like for example, there was like I had a rivalry somewhat with a guy named Ted, and we would talk shit a whole lot, so that when our matches just happen, it feels like an event. Kiyamal is another one of those people here as well. I but more like I have like what I would classify as a rival, quote unquote, and or a person I see that I am probably comparable to, and he is classified as our best Yu-Gi-Oh player. So when I play him, I plays him to my absolute best, more times than not. So when we there, so well that story, these stories are being created. It seems that you have a lot of awkward behavior. That is, I would believe, is acceptable because that is how all games works. Crafting of stories, crafting of personalities to make a game more exciting. Like, if the game is not exciting, then what keeps people interested in it? Because you gotta understand that Yu-Gi-Oh, as good as a game it is, it's still at the end of the day based upon the interactions of personalities. That's what got most people into this game. The whole Merrick versus Yami when it was trying to play a duel to the Shadow Realm, whoever is gonna die there. The whole Pegasus versus Yugi, Kaiba versus Pegasus. It feels like every game was always felt about a weight of winning or some bad outcome. Some communities try to fill up this aspect to make it more fun, more tense, more intriguing. And I do not feel bad about those situations. Now, what he is indicating is now about the aspect of bullying. And let's be clear, there are bad mentalities inside of Yu-Gi-Oh! But I think that bad mentalities doesn't mean that you're supposed to then crash out as well. If from what I was able to understand from his quote unquote complaint, is like he make a combo that probably is toxic, or probably have a lot of extenders that can, or whatever it is, FTK, whatever it gives maybe. And because the player he was playing against sees the combo that says that he built a bad deck, here's the problem here. Or he's playing garbage, or that deck is garbage. Here's the thing. There's two opinions here that's happening. There's his opinion about his perception of what his deck is, and the player's opinion on what he think his deck is. So if you think his deck is good, the other player thinks his deck is bad, when is it acceptable for he to express his views about how bad the people was, quote unquote, talking about his deck, but it is unacceptable for the person to talk about his deck for being from what they're classified as bad? This is a mentality problem here, and it's I don't get me wrong. I'm quite certain there's a lot of bullying goes through the world and a lot of bullying in Yu-Gi-Oh as well. A community I would not classify as toxic, but there are instances where they just get a lot of piling on. But this is not one of those moments that even should be entertained. He had his own perspective, his perspective he put in a video format. The person that was in local probably didn't have the ability to put up the video format, and at the end of the day, just express what he perceived as a toxic deck. So then the question then comes down: was the guy right or was the guy wrong? I am not indulging this conversation about if he is quote unquote how he take it. He should have probably looked at it from another person's perspective, and probably he would not have taken it as such. And that is all I have to say about this. Sometimes people, although certain interactions can be poor, and let me be clear, there are poor interactions, and I will obviously say that you should not allow, you should try to keep the game as healthy as possible. But someone just expressing their viewpoints that makes you feel uneasy, while you are expressing your viewpoints that makes others feel uneasy, shows a level of hypocrisy that I can't indulge in. So yeah.
The roll-out style that's quickly becoming more popular the deck, but they also got like emotional versus me after, or my friends that played my deck, but they also figured, like, you know what I mean, that I frequently, when they quickly becoming more popular, the first thing that they jumped to was to complain that such a deck existed, to complain that this deck is like basically just shitting on the deck
and I felt like as somebody who put a lot of effort in like trying to make a breakthrough in a stale format, I felt like my work was either being underappreciated or like being like thrown to the garbage just because I didn't make a deck that was morally like agreed upon by the player base, and I didn't.
All right, here the thing. All right, no one. Yet again, this comes back down to a mentality problem we're having here. There's very few times innovation happens in Yu-Gi-Oh! In this current era. I think Triff is one that says that more times than not, people just goes online and just net deck. And that's why Triff was put in the Justice Hunter format, was just creating a lot of pile decks. Just for the lulls, just for the action. Probably some of them, one of them was actually pretty good. I think it was that Ritual merged with Yummy. The Ritual Yummy, Dean Smith. It was the Ritual Yummy Mitsurugi. I think it had Dean Smith inside of it. Whatever it was, the deck was an abomination, but Trick enjoyed it. Yes, innovation is cool, but no one is supposed to give you a clap of a round of applause for making an innovation to the game. There are those who's gonna pass off credit to you if they like your idea, but there's no mandate for this. So if you created a deck that you think was good in a stale format that actually was good, that's good for your self-esteem, your own perception of how you're supposed to be dealing with the deck, your own credit. No one's out there supposed to care if they don't want to. And even worse, if they think the deck is not acceptable to their standards of how they think the game is supposed to play, then let them express their opinion. Yet again, this is a mentality problem I cannot deal with.
Yeah, I felt like that's not okay. I feel like before we discuss whether or not a deck is healthy for game design, I think we should format of
talking skipping all of this.
Whether or not having.
Yes, and also especially because I mean, deck building is a very important part of the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And even though, sometimes a discovery in deck building does not necessarily lead to something that's considered healthy gameplay or something like that, it can still be a very impressive achievement. I mean, think of Mitsurugi Yami or whatever, when that was invented. I'm not entirely sure it was Triff who invented that, but he was one of the first ones to really pioneer that strategy.
It wasn't Triff that invented it. I think Patrick Hoban team did invent it. Scotty don't even think Patrick Hoban, but I remember Patrick Hoban was one of the first people that was playing that. But that's neither here nor there.
And even though for me personally, as someone who was a huge fan of pure Yami and pure Mitsurugi in terms of their, quote-unquote health, and I thought that deck was a little bit over the top, still, I need to recognize the fact that, like, this is, like, a very impressive thing to do. Find that sort of thing and make it work and win a YCS with it, right? So it's a very interesting topic, deck building versus actual gameplay. But honestly, like this is why I wanted to mention this at the start of the video, because I think it's super important that people understand that their frustrations with balancing within the game or whatever just cannot be directed at the person playing the game. I think.
And yet again, this is not what did happen. This was two people, a guy expressing his opinion that hurts this guy's feelings. If you're trying to say that the guy then berate him and say, well, you're garbage, you're this, you're a third and fourth, then we are crossing boundaries. We are crossing ethics instead of Yu-Gi-Oh!, which Konami already has made guidelines for. But for what we were able to understand, that is not what the story is. The guy did not like your deck because he think it was unhealthy. And that is the crutch of the conversation. That is where the conversation should be. All of this is irrelevant. What I would say about the concept of deck building, yes, for me, there's a conversation I always have with my community, which is called, what makes a great Yu-Gi-Oh player? For me, my criteria are skill, deck building, knowledge. You need to have each of these components to be a good to great player. Deck building is an aspect of this game, and let me be very clear. Deck building means is that we don't all have to build mid-range decks or combo decks or stun decks introverted. It means that we look at how the meta is progressing for whichever community it is, or if you're going like them into YCS is the whole meta game at large. See if there's ways and means you can cheat around the outcomes or the best decks or interactions, and then see if there's loopholes in with cards availability to make those alterations to your deck. That is an aspect of deck building that is fine. If you're indicated that deck building also means to make pile decks and see if it works, yes, there are building pile decks or building like for example, in the 2014 era, we had Hat, which was more or less a pile deck. It's just a pile deck to deal with the meta. A nice innovation, and it was fine. It was people would perceive as very powerful for its time, but it was a fine innovation. I think another one was the one with the Black Rose. The one with the Rose package. It was Rose. Oh my god, what was the card that searched Griffin Rider? Well, they're gonna create the tokens. Whatever it is, I think they call Nash or something like that. That was a nice innovation, right? So there are going to be innovative ideas that buildings that people is going to try to cheat out when they see a meta develops, and that is fine. That is great, actually. That is what I would define as a skillful player in the concept of that building. So I have no problem with the idea of you seeing the combo, seeing the meta, seeing how decks are played, and come up with a reasonable way of dealing with those decks. The problem I have is when you think that you need to be rewarded for finding a loophole inside the meta. Which, yet again, is a conversation here.
I think this is something, and I want to say this because, of course, I've read the comments, people are saying, like, you know, content creators who are talking about these issues, like myself included, being one of the bigger ones when it comes to criticizing combo gameplay, are promoting this kind of behavior. And I want to say that I might be criticizing the game for its design or whatever, but I really don't want people to act this way towards people who are playing those decks, enjoying those decks, and are just trying to have a good time playing the game. And I just wanted to get that out here, even before we start about whether any of this is healthy or not, because I think that's an interesting discussion to have. But this initial thing is just something that I feel like we shouldn't even have to discuss this, but apparently we do. Yeah, just be nice to each other, man.
Thank you very much for that. I think it should all be agreed upon that we should just take, if you have problems with the deck, just leave it at the deck level and don't raise it up to the content creator creating like guides for the deck or whatever, or like the people playing the deck. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? If I see a person playing a terrible deck and I think the deck is terrible, I'm going to say the deck is terrible. If you feel offended by me telling you it's terrible, then you have a problem, not me. If your terrible deck beats me, then you have all right to indicate that there is a possibility that my perspective is not a good perspective. But no one in you should not be censored on how to speak about what they feel like if they're coming with some sort of interaction of what sort of decks they're utilizing. I do not like stun as a Yu-Gi-Oh player. I think stun decks is probably one of the most unskilled decks out there. It takes little imagination to be a stun player. But I would never say a stun player is not, quote unquote, don't have its own merits, you know. To build a stun deck, you need to first understand what the meta is, what cards best counter the meta. You need to understand if there's any interaction you can exploit, any engines that can be effective to get your resources continuously moving. And even more importantly, if the quote-unquote hand traps of the stand deck, which is now in today's era, Dominus Purge, Impulse, Sons of the Dominator, Spark, Spiral, whatever. If these cards can give the standard an unnatural advantage in how the meta is, this shows that although I think that stun is not a good deck, there are people that's capable of making these determinations and come up with a proper idea of how to build a stun deck. And yes, the stun deck probably is going to be playing some Floodgate. They're probably going to be playing Macrocosmos if they think they're in a heavy graveyard. Or they're going to be playing some sort of skill drain like cards, or skill drain for that matter, if they think they're in a heavy monster format that can be easily shut off and they have big enough bodies to subtract the monsters people have. Yes, these determinations is also, these cards are also going to be inside of there. Am I a person that like Floodgates? No. But that does not mean that a person that built stun was able to assess how the deck is, how the game or the meta is going, and then make a proper analysis, and then take the decision to have this card enter inside their deck to deal with the meta as it is. No. Everybody can express their opinion, but that does not take away from the person who's creating the deck. If you feels like you done something amazing by realizing as a stun player that skill drain is probably the best tech for the situation, then be that. Come on, man. Where's this soft shit?
It's just like, I understand the frustration, right? Dude, I just got home from locals. I lost a dice roll to a 60 card as a Mina, roll at whatever.
Yeah, skipping this.
I'm gonna keep putting for playing Ash Block. It's something that is, I mean,
all right.
Yeah, of course I'm gonna keep talking about in my content how I think these things are unbalanced. Whatever deck is from locals.
Sorry, let me skip back here because there's something important.
The frustration, right? Dude, I just got home from locals. I lost a dice roll to a 60 card as a Mina, roll at whatever deck as well. I got my Charmy Ash today. I wasn't happy. I still gave my opponent the handshake after the game and said GG's because it's not their fault. It's not their fault. Like, yeah, of course I'm gonna keep talking about in my content how I think these things are unbalanced, but I'm not gonna blame my opponent for playing Ash Blossom in their combo decks. Like, of course they are going to do that. So yeah, I don't know.
All right, his little rant there. I know we're probably getting into the crux of a situation or a conversation that people have been doing recently. And this is this whole conversation of non-engine. How important is non-engine in today's Yu-Gi-Oh! And is certain non-engines too powerful to be out there at 1, 2, 3? His example was Ash Blossom. I think his biggest form is indicating that Ash Blossom as a wolf is a very, very powerful card. If instead of combo decks, because it negates. Because combo players fundamentally trying to FTK you with whatever combo they're trying to achieve, then the Macharmies are the best options to counter those sort of decks. And if the combo player plays cards like one Call by the Grave, one Cross out, triple Ash Blossoms, then it makes them feel like they're incapable of, they have their quote unquote counter to your counter. If you're asking me if that is a concern that of the game, I think it is. I think that if the idea, and we air quotes here, the idea is to make a more balanced game, and Macharmies was supposed to be the tools to balance, then we should not have counters for counter playing the layer Maxi game like we does on Masterduel. Like if my opponent activate Maxi, does he have Ash? Or does he have Call? Or does he have Cross out? That miniature game is not that healthy. Because it is more or less, the game probably is determined by that one interaction. But no, you're going to well, then Joshua is probably right about Ash Blossom not being a good, healthy card because it counters the counter. And probably he is right that Ash Blossom is not a healthy card for countering the counter, but we are not dealing with the actual quote unquote problem. You are just picking an instance of how an interaction happens that was unfavorable to you. And because it was unfavorable, you lost. Then what will happen if you Macharmy the person, a combo player for this example, you Macharmy the person, he didn't have Ash, you won. So should it be fair that you, going second, have a card that also fundamentally can FTK an opponent, because a combo player will not be able to put out a proper half board under the Fualos, under the Maxi? Then should then not those cards also be checked? And then if you say yes, the Ash then loses their strength as well, if those Macharmies are not there. Which then say, but how do we then be able to contain the decks that plays? And I always states that for you to contain the deck, then we need to make better cards going into boards as a go second player. Or, even more importantly, which is where I always comes upon, be it proper turn 0 cards. I think when Konami banned put Suta 1 was probably one of the worst decisions in the game. Because what they do is they show a long line of believing that turn 0 cards are fundamentally too powerful for the game, not realizing that that's right now fundamentally, if they resolve whatever they're trying to do, means your opponent cannot play. So if you want a back and forth like this, having cards like Haviness from Telements, which is a very powerful card, not gonna lie, or Karen from Fire King, Sue from Vanquish Soul, Azuna from Kyanite, Famela from Draco Tales, Click from Cool Tunes. These cards is healthy, in my opinion, because it gives the person going second the ability to fight into whatever end board or try to stop your opponent and get into that end board. So then they will not be necessarily so heavily dependent upon resolving a Macharmy to actually play the game. And that's the biggest problem, People are looking at it only like if these cards, these mini games, goes wrong, sideways, whatever direction it goes, the Maxi resolves, you lose. The Ash resolve on my Macharmy, go second player have a likeliness he will not be able to break the board, he lose. These mini games are going to continue if people continuously believe that the issue is going to be the Ash on the Charmies instead of the fundamental of how do you get to interact with your opponent while then creating a board. The person that goes first fundamentally have an advantage, and even more important, because they have limited interactions he can be hit with before he can resolve his combo or resolve what he's trying to do. So just increase that chance or increase the amount of interaction the Go second player can have, and then we have a more balanced game. Not that hard. That's why I'm appreciative of cards like Harmonia. I'm appreciative of cards of the Ghost Sisters. All of those cards. They may not be as Harmonia is quite powerful, but there should be another step up from those types of cards, to make a game, to help keep the person that's going second into the game instead of making a fundamental FTK if you resolve your combo.
This is just, it's something that is, I mean, we are all dealing with that in the YouTube comment section when people get to comment like anonymously on stuff. Of course, people are going to be weird about it, but I just wanted to get that out there, that whenever I critique stuff like that, it is critique at the game and the balancing itself that I'm willing to talk about with people and discuss it, and not let it be like aimed at specific players or people who are streaming.
Which we appreciate, Josh. I think that what you're doing for the community is a service. And not only you, the Pats of the world, the Jesse Cottons of the world, those I am not a big MST TV viewer, but I do enjoy his content from time to time. I think what TASB also is probably one of those people that I enjoy there because of the discussions they have. But the idea is that that you are able to express your viewpoint and see if the community is going to engage, or even better yet, help push Konami in the direction. But what happens if you engage and then you feel offended? Does the criticism then have a less of a value? And that is what happens with this guy. Come on, man.
Yeah, for sure.
And that
I think
we
have time on that topic, right? Let's go into the actual topic.
Please.
This is where I feel like we can have some a pretty interesting discussion, because your initial one of the for me, one of the takeaways from your video was, of course, the thing we just talked about, and then the other thing you talked about was, are mid-range decks actually as healthy as people make it seem? And are they even better or worse than combo decks to begin with? And that is a discussion I'm willing to entertain. That is something where we can talk about it, of course. And I want to get one thing out of the way. We are going to refer, just for the simplicity of it, we are going to refer to these decks as mid-range and combo decks today. I think I would say that probably makes it easier, because one of the things I often get hung up with in Yu-Gi-Oh! When we have these discussions is I feel like the term combo and the term mid-range isn't really that accurate anymore when it comes to the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! But I mean, everyone kind of knows what we're talking about when we mention a mid-range deck and when we mention a combo deck. So just
and here is the first conversation I think that is important. I do understand why people does utilize mid-range and combo in Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's utilized for a very important reason. So that people can have a distinction of what is a hyperactive deck that's doing over too much, that have an end goal to accomplish, which is fundamentally an FTK, and a main range which primarily deals on resource gathering and playing for the third tree, for the crap bat, for a mid-level game, where their frames is usually on the turn 3, turn 5 point. So I understand the terminology, but let's not kid ourselves. There's no such thing as combos or mid-range, or that is not how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. Yu-Gi-Oh! Do not have alternate, quote-unquote, alternate win cons. Our win cons primarily deals with attacks. Because right now, maybe they had the Mystic Minds, the Final Countdown, the Exodias, the Last Turns, all of those things as a guide, as one of my friends from our local scene, this says that Konami does not allow alternate win cons anymore. So say alternate win cons are not allowed anymore. Everything he does is based on attack damage. Because even burn is not one of those decks that can really exist right now. So if you know that attacking is going to be primarily the option you are going to use to get in damage, then everything is basically about how fast you can accomplish this OTK, this attack. And that is how we should be viewing the decks instead of Yu-Gi-Oh! There are decks that's combos that can put up huge amount of damage really quick, really fast, because they can get the big monsters one time, but their resources is going to be bad beyond the turn 1, turn 2 turns. There are mid-range decks that can relatively that may be able to put up the damage, or more likely will be able to put up the damage, but they're going to be able to consistently put up the damage, but not to the extreme of a combo deck, but while gathering the resources, or at least playing for the turn 3, turn 5. And then there's the Descent deck, which more times than not will not be able to put up the complete 8,000 damage. But they are playing for the long haul of the game, just for the turn 10s, for the turn 9s, turn 7s, turn 11s of the games. And these are how we should be looking at, more or less, those types of the playstyles of Yu-Gi-Oh. But for just say for this situation, we're going to put it to mid-range combos. But I just want my 2 cents in so that we can understand that the concept of mid-range is important for when people want to have the discussion, but Yu-Gi-Oh really doesn't quote-unquote have such things. We're not Magic, you know?
For the sake of this discussion, I think we should just keep with these two terms, because of course, when someone says combo deck, we mean stuff like Elf Node or Azamina, Rolat, Mitsurugi, Adventure, whatever. And mid-range, we're talking decks like, I don't know, Pure Draco Tail, Branded, Sky Striker. You guys know the difference. The term doesn't really matter for the sake.
For sure.
Right. So why don't you make some of the points in your video, but now in a more like you said, maybe less emotional, more structured way, and then I would love to challenge you on some of these arguments, and we can have a healthy discussion from that.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the points that I always wanted to get across, and I think was one of the leading factors that I wanted to point out, is that whenever like if you watch a deck profile of somebody that like played a combo deck, and they wanted either one of locals or one of regional or like top through ICS with a combo deck. Usually you will hear this somewhere in their deck profile when they get to like key cards they think should not be on, it should not be legal. They're like, oh, this card is a really strong card, it overperformed for me, but this, frankly, Konami should have banned this shouldn't been allowed. Most combo decks are players are extremely honest about the nature of their deck up front. They're either like, oh, I'm playing this deck because this deck is very powerful and it's very degenerate and I want it to win, so I'm playing this deck, or I just wanted to showcase that this combo is very degenerate, so like Konami should probably do something about it. And we're not trying to hide that. Oh, and then usually when somebody loses to it, and somebody asks me like, oh, what happened in the game? I'm like, oh, I went first. He didn't have a hand trap. He didn't get to play Yu-Gi-Oh. Like I'm not trying to skirt around the fact that I didn't let somebody play Yu-Gi-Oh. But a lot of the times when you look at like people who play mid-range decks, like for example during that format where like Draco Tail was popular, or previously like for other like mid-range decks like Branded, a lot of the Draco Tail and the Branded players like to I want to say like to cope about how strong their deck actually is. Like for example, if you play like a mid-range mirror match, for example, you're playing Draco Tail, I'm playing Branded, or you're playing Draco Tail, I'm playing Draco Tail. You go first, you set up your board, and then I go second. And obviously, since I'm playing Draco Tail, I don't have as many pushes as, for example, a combo deck. And so even though you don't have as many interruptions, I simply just don't have that many pushes. And I don't get to break your board. And if everything plays out perfectly, like for example, if I don't have a vastly stronger hand than you do, for example, I resolve 5-mana Urgula going turn 0 against you, obviously I have a huge advantage. But let's say I don't have that, and you get to combo, and then I get to maybe like throw a few hand traps at you, but obviously because you're Draco Tail, you don't get stopped by these hand traps, and you still put up like a decently strong half board, and we just go through the steps, and I end up losing gracefully. I feel like a lot of the times I didn't get to play Yu-Gi-Oh. The mid-range deck players like to argue that because I let you normal summon Lucius, I let you go into an Artholion, I let you add back some cards, and then the instant you set your Rahu and Ketsu, I went into a Chaos and I popped it. And then you activated your Rahu, and then I flamed it. I was giving you opportunities to interact, and that's somehow better than a combo deck telling you that I'm just going to negate every card you played. But to me, that doesn't make any sense, because deep in your mind, a lot of the times you knew this game was over from the start. But you were just waiting for me to go through the steps and to lose more gracefully instead of instantly losing. And to me, that's not interaction. That's the illusion of interaction.
Okay.
And I don't know why people are valuing the illusion of interaction more than just giving you no interaction. That's like,
all right. All right. Sorry about that. His first conclusion was, or belief, is that when a combo player does a deck profile, they will say to himself, yes, what I am trying to do is degeneracy. And yes, this card is broken to bro. That's relative to a person's mentality, and even more importantly, for how people will want to do a deck profile. Anybody that does their deck profiles, no matter if it's stun, if it's combo, if it's mid range, will see it if they believe that the card is really powerful, that this card is really powerful when we match, if they're trying to be honest. So I can't even indulge in this topic. When I was playing Vanquish Soul as a pure deck, I would say my deck profile, if I did it, soon, it's just nuts. So it's nuts. It is what single-handedly keeping Vanquish Soul into the meta, because it helps you goes into the game 1 or game 2. If you've been against a combo player when Baron was legal, Baron is a nuts card because it helps you put up an early Omni Negate so you can finish your combos. And if you was talking to a stun player would tell you straight up that things like, bro, what stun card that on ban lists that there can only be one, Rivalry Warlords. These cards goes and match. These cards are so powerful that going first or second, if I resolve them, I can just pull down your field down to next to nothing. The thing is that people being honest about what is a powerful card and how it interacts in the game is relative to the person's mentality. I am not even so. I don't understand his points there. I think it's just not worth the conversation. But the second part is where the conversation should and probably needs to center around. Do you have an illusion? If I, as a combo player, resolve my combo, does it mean that, quote unquote, I am giving my opponent the illusion of winning? Alright, let me first then look at what we're talking about combo. Let me just use for this example Yami Mitsurugi. When Yami Mitsurugi resolves their combos, more times than not, you're not going to win the game. There's very little you can do to win the game. The level of interactions the Yami Mitsurugi board has is far too much than any deck that has an opening, going second hand of 6 cards if they did not utilize no hand traps. It's going to be able to break. There are interactions you can try to exploit, but you're not breaking that board. More times than not. Well, you're not breaking that board. Isn't that then also an illusion of me thinking I had a chance when I know that you resolve your end boards? So your premise is that the advantage gathering that mid-range does, which, let me be very clear, we'll get to that part. The delusion gathering of what mid-range does, which fundamentally means that as long as I gathered enough resources and I can stay alive, you will not be able to beat me. So was an illusion that there's a possibility that you never had a chance. Versus a combo that said, if I resolve my combo, there's no way you beat me. So you never had a chance. The problem we are having here is that if both of these decks does this level of unfairness, then there's an issue with the deck. There needs to be check. So if a combo deck resolve their combo, and let me just utilize the whole Snake Eyes format, when Snake Eyes was at its peak. When Snake Eyes, when you had Snake Eyes and you could go Appaloosa under your 5th summon to beat Nib, and then end off on board which would have been Savage, Formula, Savage, Princess Engrave, Flamberge in the Crystal Zone with the Fuse Spell up, Any other hand tracks that you probably will have gathered, or your hand you don't use because Ash by itself is what creates that whole entire combo, then your deck is a problem. So what Konami did? Konami said, being able to put up Nip protection too early needs to be resolved. And having these Omni Negates are problems. So them swiftly hit Appaloosa, Baron, and Savage. No, the combo deck seems more balanced, more fair. What happens that innovation happens, which he was talking about, and then they come up with the belief that they may just go on Fiend Smith, put up with King Caesar, and do the same combo again. You see, the thing is that when the deck was too powerful, there needs to be addressed because it's doing far too much. This is the same concept with mid-range. If you are talking about a mid-range deck that exists, that is doing far too much, far too much, then that needs that resource gathering loop or gaining that it gets needs to be resolved. So I do not understand the premise of, because you think my deck is fundamentally unfair, well, your deck is doing something fundamentally unfair, then my deck should be able to do something fundamentally unfair. That doesn't make any sense. Neither deck should be able to do anything fundamentally unfair, which means that they're probably not healthy, and the balance needs to be applied. Now, as for the point about if you play mid-range, maybe he used the Draco Tails, for example, and he resolved for mana, you're highly unlikely you're not going to win on turns if you are going first and Artillery hit you and bounce back cards, and then obviously they're crap back because they're going to set you two spells. They're going to have to push. They are going to have their pushes off of mana, and obviously mana could probably add back resources if they needed in that whole interaction with Artillery. Don't need to bounce back more than one card. I get that, but then you're not thinking that Draco Tail have an unfair advantage because of one interaction versus you who potentially might have multiple combos. I'm quite certain the issue here is that he's looking at the snowballing potential, but does not realize that the interaction to stop him probably is mediocre at best. A well-timed for mana can do some damage, but it's not going to destroy the whole combo line if your combo that can put up an early monster again. Now, if you're talking about beating a Draco Tail when it resolve for mana with the crapback, then he does not understand that that was just one interaction, and if your combo deck can't push through that one interaction, then your combo deck is probably not good. If your combo deck does push through that interaction, it means now that the mana, that the resources that he gained to try to put into the pushes onto your deck on his turn don't exist anymore. And he probably, if he did use Artillery to bounce back a card, it means that he have one less card to play with, because obviously the other card that you will have two less cards to play with, because most times than not, for mana will have to be in the graveyard, and the card that he bounce means there's a card he cannot recover from the graveyard. Your next, the argument can be, but what happens if you discard Pan or Urgula, and then you just pop a monster, pop a spell? Then it becomes a bounce, pop, and a pop. Yes, there are possibilities these things can happen, but that is more based upon luck, chance, not preparation. Whatever your open hand is, and you happen to see it, it happens. His take here is not good. I don't even understand what he think it was, but sure.
my first point.
Yeah. Okay. So let me challenge you on that a little bit, because I get what you're saying, and I do agree on a surface level. I think this is something that can happen, where and it happens to me sometimes as well, where I go first with a quote unquote healthy mid range deck, and I get to a point in the game relatively quickly where I set up super well. And I just know, also because maybe I have like a couple hand traps in hand to back my board up that my opponent can't see, but like I know that I'm going to win this game like 99% of the time. My opponent just doesn't know it yet. You know, they look at my board, they might see it. It seems like they could play into it, but realistically, I know that I'm going to be winning. Right? This does happen, and I will agree with you that even healthy mid-range decks, quote unquote, or even mid-range decks can turn into something unhealthy if they are too strong. Just because I enjoy this play style, it does not exempt these decks from ever becoming too powerful. Right? They definitely could be too powerful in that sense.
Which is his point I just made. If you're a mid-range that does too much, gather too much resources, put up too much interruptions, then your mid-range deck needs to be checked. That is the same concept. If your combo deck does this.
What I would like to ask you, if you really feel like the Draco Tail mirror match in the pure Draco Tail format was really comparable to like a combo deck going first, because I genuinely feel like there was so much more to a Draco Tail mirror match. One of the main reasons why I like that matchup so much is because to me it felt like there were so many hands that made going second completely playable. Just to give you one example, just the simple having one Ghost Spell or one Ash plus one of the spell cards, right? Whether it's a Rahu or a Ketu, I feel like that alone made going second like playable most of the time, where you activate a Rahu, they flame it, you bell the flame, and you get to play the game. On the other hand, if you drew a card like Bell alone as your only hand trap going second into a combo deck, you most of the time were not able to play the game.
I think that's true. During that format, I did end up playing Draco Tail. I played Draco Tail that entire format. I did not end up playing Yummy. I didn't end up playing K9, but I wanted to bring up that during basically the entire time that pure Draco Tail was legal and at full power, because the issue is during the latter half of pure Draco Tail format, they hit Draco Tail, right? They like put two things to one, and we didn't have the branded cards yet, so that just like went to shit for like a couple months. But during the peak of that Draco Tail era, the format, like obviously pure Draco Tail mirrors were nice, but due to other forces in the format, for example, the VSK9 deck, like being as strong as it is, you didn't really get to play like pure Draco Tail mirrors that often. And even then, what I wanted, like one point I wanted to bring up about like mid-range decks, I think this will lead to one of my next points. I'll use one of my next points to try to refute one of your points. So, as a combo deck player, or like someone who's recently played.
Okay, so I think he's probably just finished his point there. And yet again, it's not a good point to be finishing on. During the Draco Tail matchup, when you had the Draco Tail matchup in the Justice Hunter format, I am not gonna lie, it was very, very difficult. The more times than not, the better Draco Tail player will win. So those matchups I played shows an issue of skill. Right? So I have no problem here with the conversation about right in those formats. Yes, Draco Tail was a healthy mid-range deck, and yes, the matchups, the mirror matches was fun. But then his argument is that KNI admits that those matchups is going to be highly unlikely to happen. But why? What was KNI VS? At its absolute core, KNI VS is a combo deck. I might troll my friends and call it a mid-range deck. KNI VS was a combo deck. A very powerful combo deck that fundamentally can do two things. One, it can FTK you. basically what will happen is that you in your combo, while you're setting up your combo, you end on Bogard, Trap, and 104. Use Bogard effect to burn your opponent in your turn when you do your combo. Allow your opponent to play any normal summon or effect that happens on field. You utilize 104, C104, rip a card, decreases slip point by hand, and negate it. He then comes down from 65 down to 32 and 32.50. I Boga burn you for 15, and I Trap burn you for 18. The game is over. So it was a fundamental FTK for KNIVS. The thing is that although that is also one option that KNIVS could do, the second option is no better. They could just say to themselves, we're going to play and gather resources to the point you cannot play. It was a combo deck that have the element that it can play as a mid-range. But fundamentally, it was a combo deck. And then what the point that we're coming here is that, from his perspective, is that combo decks are fear. Or mid-range decks are the bigger problem here. But he have just highlighted a combo deck stopping him, who was playing a mid-range deck, from being able to play the game effectively. So what was the point of your video? Oh my, this, bruh. The combo that the mid-range matchup that you think that can happen, if there's a full mid-range format and the blow so you can get happen to you, it's all fine in the mid-range in the matchup. But if somebody just dropped the KNIVS in this variable inside of here, which, as we said, is a combo that can play as a mid-range that if needed, what happens? Your mid-range then become invalidated. And I should know. When I played during Justice Hunter format in real life at my local scheme, I won almost every single tournament I played except 4. Except 4 at the height of KNIVS's powers. Not right now where the deck is fair because Su is at 1, but the height at its powers. KNIVS, the combo deck, just smashes the mid-range deck. And that's not even my local scheme. I played a while on Omega in that era as well. The Just Hunter format and preparations for not only the voices I took part in, which, let me be very clear, on Omega, I played KNIVS primarily for the whole Justice Hunter format. I was always among the top 100 for sure. I was always in the top 100. But my height does normally I would get myself anywhere between the top 10 to top 20 on Omega. Every single season. Always was among the top 20. Because when I played against the Mitsu, when I played against the Draco Tails, I know my deck have enough pushes and enough resource gathering that I can blow through these stats. And even worse is that Azuna was such a hard counter for mana and the Draco Tail matchup. Because what you can do is like go like Izuna send Lupus goes bring and then go into a rank 5. The rank 5 options are very unique. There are times I will go Balon buck my opponent, big monster, whatever it may be. If he have up oh lord, you will not just pop the monsters if a Draco Tail card is activated. I will put that because the defense is like 2300. And since I have Lupus attached to it, I then say to myself, I allow my opponent to annoy Bucket and then let them pass. When they pass, I go straight to battle phase. Because Horn is now set, since Horn is there, and I buck his monster, and Horn can't target my XYZ, all they can do is remove the Arcalene if they have it. If they're able to utilize for mana, they will have to go for mana and hope to discard Pan to even try to attempt to out this. To even try. And if they don't have the Pan, then they lose. Because what will happen is that my Valon will attack the defense monster that is Buck, destroy it, and I will then go into the main phase 2 and just Zeus him. And just Zeus. That was a combo deck being able to do this to a mid-range deck. So yet again, if a combo deck is too powerful for the format to exist, should it not be hit? I always said that Vanquish Soul needs some sort of hit. Didn't like the idea that they hit Sue, but I think that they kind of hit the first hit I think they had, although the deck was still powerful but inconsistent, was the Razon to 1 and Stick Your Soul to 1. When that happened and the deck was still powerful enough to play because people was just utilizing the K&A package to get the Soyuja to help fix hands or to help pull for that. I guess what they could do if they just hit like what they did in the OCG. Well, I think they hit Su to 1 now. But like what they're doing on Masterduel, it just hit all those cards down. The ones that gives you the pushes. If they just straight up buy the Roy after they hit Razon, KNVS would be utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. Because to get to Soyuja now, it's gonna take unreasonable. Your hand is gonna be unreasonable. You're gonna have to find a way to get Jalong and Izuna just to even get to Soyuja and hope my opponent do not have Ash because you're not gonna be you're probably not gonna be able to put out Ripper. If they did just straight up hit Neroid and just leave Su at 3 Razon at 1 and Stake at 1, that would be unplayable. So I still don't understand what he's trying to say about if a deck is too powerful combo that stops his mid-range deck Draco Tail from playing. Why is the mid-range deck yet again unhealthy?
Played a lot of combo decks. One big issue that I found in combo decks, because during the NAWCQ, I ended up playing Elf Mode. Right? I played Elf Mode for the qualifiers. I ended up playing 60-card combo rollout. I ended up playing Doomsy. Like all the decks recently, I've been playing is combo decks, and I found that in combo decks, there's one thing that's very clear. The starter extended quality in combo decks are so much worse than mid-range decks. For example, let me list the 3 big mid-range decks. Or I'll list 2 mid-range decks and one mid-range deck, one combo deck that cosplays a mid-range deck. The combo deck that cosplays a mid-range deck that I'll show is KT. I think KT has mid-range gameplay, but it's frankly combo. They end on way too many interruptions.
I can agree with that, yeah.
And then the 2 pretender mid-range decks is Draco Tail and Branded.
Yep.
And to some extent Sky Striker. I think cards like White Albaz, cards like Branded High Spirits, cards like Draco Tail Artholion, or for 5 mana, any of those Draco Tail fusion spells, and then cards like Rotary, like Rotary Reveal Q, Rotary Reveal Revo. These cards, just by themselves, a lot of the time trade up versus hand traps. For example, if I have 2 hand traps and my opponent activates Fallen of the White Dragon, that one Fallen of the White Dragon might trade for both of my hand traps, and they still might have something on top of that. If I have 2 hand traps versus the Draco Tail player, they might still just end on all three of their traps, and I use both of my hand traps. I stop them from going everywhere else, but my hand just doesn't beat the 3 traps they have. Or like, for example, I play versus Cool Tune.
Then you're a bad player. If you draw Ash, you Ash the Raho. More times than not, they will end on 1 trap. If none at all.
I opened Imperm plus a Veiler, and then they show me Rotary Rico, and suddenly, no matter where I Imperm Veiler anywhere, I'm just done for. Like, I feel like the reason why mid-range decks exist is because there's enough of these overpowered starters that always trade up, such that you can build your deck in a way that is both consistent, powerful, and then also has room for a bunch of non-engine. Because a bunch of non-engine is what makes the mid-range deck. But combo decks don't have that luxury. Like, for example, I don't know, a lot of people like to shit on Elf Note, but frankly, as someone who played Elf Note, and somebody who I think understands Elf Note to the highest point, because, like, not to toot my own horn or anything, but in the NAWCQ and before that, I was the only Elf Note player that publicly released their deck list to have both Arcanite Magician and Contact C in their deck. And guess what? In the top 4 of the YCS Montreal, they had both cards, and Poncho specifically stated that they took inspiration from my Elf Note list to create their Elf Note list. So I think in terms of like combo deck knowledge, I think I'm ahead of the curve. Elf Note has some of the worst starters in the entire game. Like, for example, if you have any 2 hand traps that stop your opponent, like, for example, you have Ash Blossom, you have Ghost Ogre, you have Imperm, you have like any of these quote-unquote 1-for-1 hand traps that are just not good. For example, if you open 1-for-1 hand traps versus Cool Tune, a lot of the times if they open the right 2-card combination, you can open 3 1-for-1 hand traps, and that just doesn't work against their deck. But if you play against Elf Note, there is only exactly 1 2-card combo in Elf Note that beats 2 hand traps. Every other 2-card combo loses to 2 hand traps. For example, if I have Lucina and Medius, you interact with Lucina, you interact with Medius, I pass. I have Tinia plus Terminus, you interact with Tinia, you interact with Terminus, I pass. But the only 2-card combo that sometimes beats 2 hand traps, and has to be 2 very specific hand traps, is I have to have either Lucina / Tinia, plus I have a chicken. Because I will summon the Lucina, I'll almost summon the chicken. The Lucina or the Tinia forces a hand trap there. My chicken can then make +3 to make a June Pride. And my chicken
is the power pigeon. Okay.
Yeah, the chickens are just follow-up, and then the June Pride forces a hand trap. So that's the only case where it trades up.
What about Regina against Imperm Veiler? You just assume they Imperm
Regina inherently is, like, Regina is inherently neg in card advantage, and Regina can be played around, right? For example, if I have Imperm Veiler and I play against an Elf Note deck, like, for example, recently I've been watching a lot of high-level Masterduel gameplay. Like, shoutouts to T2. They like stream a lot of their ladder climb content, but in Masterduel, I see a lot when you know you play against Elf Note and you have Imperm Veiler, you play around the Regina by preemptively Imperming and Veiler the level 6 in the field. Obviously, if they have the perfect extender, it can end up biting you in the back, because they can get back into that monster, but a lot of the time, you can play around a card such as Regina. So even though, yes...
It's good to start here. Lies. Elf Note have high quality cards. And that's the problem. What he's looking at is saying that there's no 2 combo cards in a combo deck that can beat 2 imperms appropriately, like 2 cards in a mid-range that can. The problem that he's failing to forget is that he's playing a combo deck. A combo deck means is that he's going to have primarily more engine and less hand traps. Unlike for a mid-range deck will primarily have more non-engine, because he puts Sky Striker in this category, more non-engine than starters. So here's how this is going to play out. There are times that I can go in a, where we are playing, let me just use for example, a good mid-range deck. Let me use, don't want to use Sky Striker. Let me stick with the Draco Tail. There are more times than not
we can say we open Lucius for mana. If I normally summon Lucius to add, and you try to imperm me, I will just for mana and hope I have another monster in hand and then just not have the additional search, because I know I can just use Rahul to send the white search off, probably searching Urkula there, so I can get my other spell and trap and my other monsters and shit like that. I know this is a line but the problem is that if you imperm Lucius, you toss with for mana and then you get hit with impulse, you're passing. You're passing. What he is trying to do is craft unique situations, right? That is not likely going to happen. And if no player now is going to summon the one that to search the monster, let me just say that when that search happen, I try to imperm. What happens if you didn't have Regina in hand? Just use Regina and just pop it away and just summon and then summon from that. You get to his synchro and he just get an advantage card. If Regina is a quick effect on my turn, not certain, but let me just say that is the case. Let me just say that if not the case, then you goes Regina. You then go Regina the man in perm. You activate welcome, which probably people have bumped up from 1 to probably like 2 to 3 now. Send to the level 6 from your middle zone to special friend that the Regina to then go into your synchro. You're going to then be like, bruh, but what happens if I get Ogre there? Okay then, your middle zone is not free up, and you have just let your opponent goes down 2 cards for 2 cards. So any high level extender, the one that was special, set trap, discard trap, bring back level 1, or bring back Regina, whichever the case is, then bring the level 1. Your combo is off to the game, off running. Because the nature of combo that is that you're going to have more angel, which means you're going to have more extenders to continue than a mid-range deck. So making an analogy saying that, oh, but there's in the current meta, bro, bullshit. I play Snake Eyes format. Normal summon Ash. In perm. Sure. Activate Bonfire. Ash. Sure. Activate Wanted. Your Ash is going, in perm is gone. Do we have a bell here? No bell. Okay, so I know you don't have no bell. You don't have drawing, and because if you did, for God's sake, you probably would have let me add the bonfire and draw me there. Right? Obviously, it would not work because the Snake Eyes can play on the draw. But fine. You just did not bell my wanted. So I have to be assuming that you either have another imperm, I will have to try to play around an imperm, or potentially another Veiler, right? If that is your turn, because I at this point I am not going to be scared of Ogre, because I'm not going to special summon by discarding a card from my hand, whatever card that will be, summon the above which set OSS. Game is over. I just went mid-tree. And the sad thing is that if the man was playing Ogre in that list with those 2 hand traps, then even if he Ogre, whatever he Ogre right now, it doesn't matter, because what's going to happen is that if he probably could Ogre the Fuse Spell, I guess. But the minute I get to OSS, I can just straight up just go OSS, bring Oak summon back, and then off the races. Popular, and then be off to the races. If Popular was out there, then we would just go Ash, probably go if we got we are still assuming that the Bell Star is there. We could then go like, or bring back Ash, use Ash effect, send the Bell Star, going to Flamberge, or going to Poplar, even worse. Poplar search, fuse spell search, the Bell Star in next farm, put it down, plays extra zone, set walk, or send that as well. Go into Flamberge, use that, link off that, but crystallize the ECM level, the other the Bellstar monster that can come from the extra monster. Bruh, you're off to the races. You're not going to lose. And you just played through 2 to potentially 3 hand traps. The problem is that here are isolating an issue of a particular meta that probably may have a strong enough hand traps to resist quote unquote an elf no board. I do agree. But let me just say his unique situation, he can pick out a perfect situation. That perfect situation is not likely gonna happen. You're not gonna likely see Ash Imperm every hand or Ash Veil every hand. Bruh. It's talking about invalidation. You are defeating the point of what you're arguing. You're arguing if a combo a mid-range deck is worse. You are picking a situation that primarily may not even happen that often with a mid-range deck versus a combo deck like KNA VS that I can talk about when I sit down and I normally someone use rising effect and I see my opponent Ash and I reveal a Zona, I just see my opponent scoops. My opponent scoops. Because they need to have imperm or they're going to lose.
Like Lucina plus Regina beats Ash Blossom plus Veiler if you don't Veiler them in the correct place. But if you play like you're supposed to play, that even that 2-card combo does not beat 2 hand traps.
I have a question, and like my issue with this, because what you said is true, right? Like,
honestly, this discussion we will have to stop here. I think I'm gonna have to do this in multiple parts. I will probably chop it up on YouTube. But we are not going to be able to spend potentially 2 hours going through this whole thing. So for now we are going to stop it at 22:12, where he is trying to debate the hand traps. 2 hand traps is not enough. And we're going to join it. Where I'm going to do part 2 to this, because I think I'm going to do it in like 4 to 5 parts, or if possible, I'm going to probably chop them down into a little smaller intervals so that people can enjoy. But that is me discussing what I'm going to do. But until next time, there's Barbardian with your lead setting out, and we will be back with part 2 of the ultimate combo versus mid-range discussion.